Hi, and welcome back to Continual. Tonight we are ready to go beneath the streets, above the streets, and maybe pickpocket a little bit as we start talking about penny dreadfuls and a bit of the Victorian dramas. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and let's see who is coming along to form this little merry band and gang for the evening. So, Doc, you're up first.
Hi, I'm Doc Coleman. I write steampunk comedy adventure. So I'm kind of steeped in the Victorian era, and aside from my stuff, which is more on the humorous side, there's plenty of excellent source material out there that I love to delve into for research purposes. Yes, for research.
For research. It's for the research. Ken?
I'm Ken Lange. I write science fiction, fantasy, lit RPGs, and while I don't write in the genre, I do enjoy it quite a bit. So I love the TV show, and I'm one of the few people in the world who actually like the what was that one? I forgot the name of the movie already. I just brought it up.
We'll get back around.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
That's it. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
For two of us, darling.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to do a movie, that's going to, finish off somebody's career, like, anyway.
Exactly.
Lee?
Good day, gentlefolk. My name is Lee Martindale. I am a short story slinger. I edit anthologies and create mischief whenever I can.
Hansi?
I'm Hansi Oppenheimer, and I had been a documentary filmmaker, mostly studying fandom and pop culture, and I have pivoted and have been working in horror the last couple of years, and been doing acting, voice work, and producing B horror movies.
So I think that when we look, for a lot of us, the work out of the Victorian era is an extremely strong influence even through to today. I mean, when we look at a lot of the stories, going back to that notion of the penny dreadfuls as being the gasp, the writing for the masses, it's not like any of or all of us have produced, for God forbid, an audience. So when we look at, the stories that came out of that period, especially the Victorian era, right? This is, to me, the Victorian era is a fascinating period where we see the blend and the conflict of classes, where we see occult and science, merging, mashing, colliding on a regular basis. We get to see this notion of a world where it is shifting between the old world of kings and the new world of industry and technology, and it just created so many new fun genres. Science fiction came out of this period. We saw a lot of the mysteries really come out of this period. The Rue Morgue, all these kinds of stories in the genres we write in today all have strong foundations and ties back to this period. And I think it's one of those periods that it's almost timeless in a certain way, because it was also such a period of free expression, but at the same time such repression coming down. And we've got such great mysteries out of the period, and so I think it's a tremendous amount of fun to come in and talk about. So, Doc, I'm going to throw this to you, being that you love to write about this period of time, albeit with a slightly, jaded and sick, twisted sense of humor, which of course speaks to me. What is it about kind of the Victorian dramas, the penny dreadfuls, that period of time that speaks to you? What is it you love about it?
Well, you've kind of touched on it right there. And I see this more with steampunk, but you also see it. It was a period in time when like anything was possible. And I often talk about, steampunk being the genre where You can resurrect an ancient mummy in order to help him talk to you, to the Venusian ambassador, so that you can get the materials you need to wage war against the fairies that live in the bottom of your garden. And, all of that is like perfectly reasonable and acceptable.
You were with me this past weekend?
Yes. I was the one with the blue candle instead of the black one. So, no, but a lot of the fact that that's in steampunk is because so much of it came out of the Victorian era. And I have a lovely cat here, and just get her to lie down for a second. There we go. Is the
Mouser, no doubt.
The Victorians believed in just about everything. I mean, it was an era where one man studying on his own could conceivably master all the different disciplines of science, and yet people were still very religious, and they still believed in all these various occult powers and ancient legends and wisdom. It's a realm of possibilities, and that lives on. And then you've got the other aspect is you've got the class structure, and that leads to an enforcement of etiquette. And I refer to my writings as mad science, manners, and mayhem. And it was very much the whole thing about the manners, where you could have the confrontation with the big bad, and everyone is being impeccably polite, even though you're about to engage in a life and death struggle. Because that was what you did, that was ingrained into you, and there's something about that in this incredibly casual modern era is both fascinating and attractive. And now let someone else answer.
So Ken, I'll throw this same thing to you. What is it about kind of the era and the period that speaks to you, calls to you, that you enjoy?
Well, like I said, both you guys kind of hit on it, but it's the era when you finally have the industrial age coming on. You have magic, you have religion, you have super polite society and Britannica, which is the alternate version in a lot of the steampunk stories. And you have this whole mixture where you marry the occult and science and the industrial age. And like you said, anything was possible. And crazy enough, it's like in real life, they were doing mummy brown, for instance, where they would actually take a mummy, grind it up, and make paint out of it, because, that's what you did back in the day.
Or medicine.
Or medicine.
Or they just snort it for fun.
There's that too. And then they made the arsenic purple, the purple that's made out of made out of arsenic, I think. It's one of the toxic materials, and it's very rare today. But it was basically they did the most insane things, and it was normal. For instance, putting lead-based paint on your face that killed you. The makeup was amazing. And then, like you said, you got Mary Shelley creating Frankenstein. You got like I said, the occult with Dracula and the werewolves, and it was, like you said, everything we do now, or at least in my genre, and I think most of yours too, is that we have followed in our footsteps and just made it more modern. That's it. And we've taken the same myths and stories and reworked them. I have the vampire story that I wrote with Cain, for instance, from the Bible. But we've all used this for inspiration, and we continue to do it today. So it's anything was possible, and they did a lot with it. So I can't complain. It's been a lot of fun. That's one of the reasons I enjoy it so much. There's just so much magic to it.
Lee, how about for you?
For me, part of it is the atmosphere, the environment. Um, Many of the things that you all have touched on included. Um, there was a certain shelter, a certain way the villains could hide, and that was the class structure, which was extremely rigid. There was um, that point in a horror novel. It's the point where the hero loses hope, but it was an ongoing thing in the lower classes. It was straight on survival. Uh, the the industrial age coming on had its own problems, um, and they can be added into this as well. Um, the I don't know. It's just such a rich environment to play in.
Hansi, how about for you?
Well, I definitely think the invention of things like in reading Dracula, like how he, each. I mean, it's interesting because like each journal entry is this was typed, or all these different machines that were just being created at the time. I have the annotated version, so it makes notes on that, and it's very cool to see. Like, yeah, like there's Dracula, and you have this monster, and but then again, like you have typewriter or dictaphone, or yeah, it's a very magical time, and the atmosphere is very, very appealing. Although I will say my parents ran a prop shop, and my mom was obsessed with Victoriana, so our house was Victorian furniture, like original Victorian furniture. That stuff is not comfortable. These girls, they're horsehair, they're miserable. So I guess you had to like sit up properly and everything because just the furniture was so damn uncomfortable.
When I look at the period and when we look at the stories from the period, and I kind of want to hit you up with that notion of what's a favorite story or influence, even if it is something like some of the big crime stories, Burke and Hare. If we look at, of course, Jack the Ripper, some of these stories, or if we look at one of the bigger influences to me that I and frequently it's shown up accidentally, but one of the bigger influences for me has always been Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Right? I've always been fascinated by that notion of, because it was a blend of technology and science with a bit of magic, but it's that notion of what's the true self, the shadow self, what's the monster that lurks beneath, and we have seen that. I think my first real introduction to that and understanding what it was, of course, came through the great film scholar of Bugs Bunny, right? As we see the big monster transformed.
I just love interesting monsters.
But I love the ways that we've seen that story transformed and developed over the years, and things like the Incredible Hulk and all these different stories. So Ken, what's for you, which of kind of the stories of the period is a favorite, maybe even something that's worked its way as a strong influence?
I kind of got to lean with Frankenstein, the Mary Shelley story, because of it combines the occult so well with science. And again, it kind of falls into my thing where you have this whole mythic thing going on along with all the science, and we always call it Frankenstein's monster, and the only monster in the story was Victor Frankenstein, in my opinion. But I think that's probably one of my favorites because, like you said, it kind of shows the monster, and then it shows the creation, and one is a product of what they were made of, and one of them was just downright evil. But the fact that he married science, that's what allowed them to marry science and the occult together, because it was a new age back then. It's so new.
Funny, I had some friends Frankenhooker for the first time. They'd never seen it. And so it's still relevant.
It really is. It's great. But yeah, so I think that's probably where I would lean to. The other one I would go with would probably be Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, because of it's science and fantasy and magic and science. And it's because Dracula is just pure fantasy, it's pure myth. There's no science involved, unless, of course, you go with this guy back here. Back then. But back then, when they were actually making those in there, that's what really drew me into it. So,
Lee, how about for you?
You can't really call them stories. My inspirations a lot are the journals and the autopsy reports from the Jack the Ripper case. It is possible to lay one's hands on the autopsy reports and most of the police journals at the time, and just, okay, this was happening, this was going on around it, this is the result of what happened, just because, let's keep in mind that, women were being butchered. And to me, just, it puts me in a proper frame of mind. I know you're calling the little wagons even as we speak.
So, since we're talking about that, how do you feel about the DNA tests that point back to Kaminsky, which was probably the not so popular, but the most likely of Rippers?
I would call it credible. How I feel about it, it would have been, I hesitate to say more fun, but more publicly pleasing if it had been someone in the royal family. But Kaminsky makes excellent sense.
So,
Hansi, how about for you? What's your story of the period?
Well, as a kid, I was obsessed with Dark Shadows. I was madly in love with the guy who played the Wolfman and Batman. But yeah, I love all the Ripper stuff. I will watch anything that's Ripper involved, because it's mystery we'll never figure out. But there was also a woman who was a serial killer around the time of the Ripper. I think they called her Jolly Jane. And so, yeah, there were other serial killers. Like, the Ripper is just, like, I guess because it's such a mystery that they'll never, right? They've identified the other murderers, but, like, because it's a mystery, we can just there's always a theory.
Doc, how about for you?
Well, there's two things that really stand out in my mind. One is Sherlock Holmes. And part of that is that, I mean, we talked about the whole class structure and how it was kind of rigid, but one of the other things is you also had people that transcended class. That were known as the originals, and sometimes they were poor people who, because of their style, were accepted in the higher classes. And sometimes they were higher class people that could, like, go anywhere because they just didn't care about the strictures of society. And I look at Sherlock Holmes as one of those. It's like he can put the manners on, he can take them off. As long as you treat him the way that he feels he should be treated, you're fine. But you have that, in a lot of things, you have that contrast of the way Sherlock acts and the way Dr. Watson acts, because Dr. Watson is very much a product of his class. And there's also the whole logic and scientific investigation aspect of all those stories. And it's also a view into the intrigues of the area, whether they were political or criminal or what have you. The other story that comes to mind is Around the World in 80 Days. And for me, a lot of that is the whole adventure. I mean, that's one of the major inspirations for the series that I'm writing, is just because so much of steampunk is written in London or in England, and it's like, I've got this whole big planet to explore. Let's go do that. So it's like, ever the stories that I write are all in other places in the world, exploring what else is happening. But it's I don't know, it's that lovely sense of adventure, even when your character is very much a fish out of water, who didn't prepare more than grabbing train timetables and a change of shirt, and is just making it up as he goes along. I love that kind of stuff.
Doctor Who, kind of like, right?
Yep.
There are those episodes where they just end up in some Victorian.
Yep. Yeah, there's definitely aspects of that ended up in Doctor Who.
Well, it is the BBC, so.
Yay, BBC.
So, looking at this, so now that we've kind of got an idea for where we're starting at in the Victorian period, because again, we can't get away from that, and we're probably going to be coming back to a little bit of stuff from the period. But I want to come forward now to, let's talk about some of the books, TV, movies, film, because we've gotten a kind of a renaissance of it in the last, let's call it 15, 20 years. We've seen a lot of it in movies, TV, books. We've seen a lot of it get, reimagined. And this is outside of Sherlock Holmes, right? We've seen a lot of reimagining of Sherlock Holmes, and that's almost, a consistent thing. So, Lee, what about for you? What's something out of, or let's call it the more current times, that's inspired by, set in the period of, kind of the Victorian Gothic? Some of the Penny Dreadfuls, even talking about the Penny Dreadful TV series. So what's one of the ones for you that really grabs you there?
Gail Carriger's Parasol Protocols.
Parasol Protectorate.
Yeah, the Parasol Protectorate. She's got a nice touch with the period. It is thick on the ground. The sense of the period is thick on the ground in her writing, and then she takes it off sideways with little comments that sort of twist it into the amusing territory. She's got good characters. Her plotting is excellent, but I very much enjoy that sense of the period with those characters in those situations. You've got a woman who is basically poisoned to anything supernatural because she herself has no soul. Her love interest / I want to throw a tea party, is a werewolf in the service of the crown, and rather pleasing to look at. You've got his second, both in the back and in his day job, or night job, depending on the assignment, she studied wolf packs, okay? He is probably the sanest character in the book. And just, I don't know, there's something about him I'd like to sit down and talk to. And then there's Lord Al-Qadama, an ancient vampire. He gets all the best dialogue.
Yes.
He is just he's classy, he's gay, he's got a harem. And if there's anything that he doesn't know, he does a good job of winging it. But my favorite character in the book. So that's my pick for prime Victorian modern interpretations.
Hansi, how about for you?
Well, I mean, we were talking about Penny Dreadful, and I think that was really interesting because they brought all of the monsters in, and in each of the characters, you had, Frankenstein, Jekyll and Hyde, everybody, and I thought it was in a really interesting way. I wish there had been more time for it, but I want to know, have any of you read any actual Penny Dreadfuls? Because I tried to read Barney the Vampire.
I've got a copy of it.
Yeah, I
got 3 pages in.
It's so tiny. I'm too old to read it.
Yeah.
It seems pretty dense. Obviously, they were going for the words, as many words as they could get, I guess.
Well, obviously they were getting paid by the word back in the day, but and so one of the things that I found funny,
but also pages were an expense, so you had to put as many words on the page as you could.
That's why the text is so tiny. Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
But I mean, one of the things that I found funny was going from Barney the Vampire, which you feel like he ought to be selling you, a used chair, a used carriage, to Dracula,
Got the Irish treatment, made it romantic.
Mm. All right, Doc, how about for you?
As far as a modern reinterpretation, one of the shows I really liked was The Alienist, and I was kind of sad that it only got 2 seasons. The feeling that I got was they got 2 seasons out of it before the budget tapped out because they didn't have quite enough viewership. But it was both an excellent show in terms of the scenery and showing how things crossed classes while maintaining the class structure, and the look at the science of the time, because I was, the main character is basically an investigative psychologist, trying to figure out what is it about people that makes them go and do crimes, not just so that he can figure out who did it, but so he can figure out what can we do so that they don't want to do it again. So we can rehabilitate these people. But it was absolutely excellently written and acted, and sadly we didn't get quite enough of it. But
Ken, what about for you?
Well, of course, the Penny Dreadfuls. I'm very interested to see what Guillermo del Toro does with the new Frankenstein, but A Discovery of Witches was really good, and I'll probably get crucified for this, but Interview with a Vampire has some good settings in that time period with Lestat and even Louis at the time. I know it's the early 20th century, but it was. I thought all those were really well done, but I think Discovery of Witches is probably up there. And if you want a really modern interpretation, The Strain. I know it's set in today, but The Strain had a lot of Gothic elements into it that was brought into modern day with Del Toro. Again, Del Toro. I like his style. But But
He
Discovery,
gets gothic. He gets gothic.
he really does. But going back to Discovery of Witches, the Claremonts back in the flashbacks were really well done in the books. Not as well done in the TV show, but still well done, I guess. I mean, it was all right. But I just really enjoyed those and how they revisited the period, even if they did make it a little cleaner than I would have liked. You know, I was hoping for a little more dirt and grime in it, but I wasn't going to get that. So those are the ones I like. But like I said, if you want a really new and modern interpretation of it, go with The Strain. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's a lot of fun.
So looking at, and one of the things I do want to hit on is films, right? Movies, ones that we get to see. Because, I mean, again, I think one of the big challenges we run into with things set in the period is things set during that Victorian era, whether it's in London or England or it's set in other places, the scene itself is such a character. And when you've got the time for books, when you've got the times for TV shows and series, you can bake that in. But with film, you've got a pretty limited time, and you're banking on inheriting a lot of the established credibility and aesthetics of the things that have come before, TV, movies, and whatnot. So when you see, oh, I know I'm walking into this period of time, you kind of absorb and wrap yourself in a lot of, in a lot of that setting. And, looking at some of the movies and things like that, we were talking before we got started, almost, steal this from Ken a little bit, but, we talked a little bit about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which, let's say, played very loosely with the period. But if we look at, very, very, very loosely with the period and the characters, and a lot of fun. I own a copy of it, but we all know the problems with it. But looking at some of the movies, what do you think what's one that wraps itself in that so well for you in terms of film, that just grabs that setting, grabs the aesthetic, and pulls you into the story so quickly? So Hansi, that's on you.
From Hell.
From Hell?
Yeah, it does it really well because, you have the class thing and, he's a chunky, he's off smoking opium and, yeah, it's beautiful, but it's also like terrifying and they gave it a happier ending, obviously, than most of the Ripper stuff, but it definitely had that vibe. And I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was shot really beautifully. And you could, you kind of want to be in that, except for, the getting murdered part.
Small technicalities. All right, Doc, how about for you?
Okay. I have to admit, the thing that most immediately came to mind was Stardust, which is much more fantasy, because you've got the little English town with the wall, and everything is magical on the other side of the wall. But that kind of, it captures a certain amount of the humdrum class structure and the desire for escape. And I have to admit, it's much more of an adventure type story and much less gothic. Although I absolutely love Captain Shakespeare and his pirates going up and trying to capture lightning. Succeeding in capturing lightning, but I guess something that's more in the gothic trend, I would go with something like Van Helsing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I loved that one.
Yeah,
that was my choice.
I mean, and that's that's is a certain amount of campy and corny too, but it's also really well done in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
All right, Ken. So I'll throw that one to you. What now that Van Helsing is?
Now that I've taken your pick,
Actually, like I said, that was actually I was sitting here looking at Van Helsing. I was like, I'm gonna pull it up. But Bram Stoker's Dracula was actually really good too for that. And they did really well with the era. I mean, it was looking back at it now, it's a little rough.
The accents. There's a couple of accents in there that just. But
if you can ignore that,
yeah, despite that,
it's all right. But no, but he said the visuals, so I would have to go with Bram Stoker's. I mean, that's another vampire movie, but they seem to really do goth really well with vampires. Imagine that. I mean, it's either that or, like I said, the new Frankenstein movie that's coming out later this year. Now that looks amazing, but I haven't seen it, so I can't really judge. But it's Del Toro, and I just don't think he's going to mess that up. And he's got all the right people doing it. I think that'll be my next go-to for him is that Frankenstein movie. So do this thing in another year, and I'll be calling that movie out probably. So I'm very intrigued. If you haven't noticed.
All right, Lee. What's the film for you?
I'm going to have to double with the person who said From Hell.
Yay.
Yay.
Yep.
It had the right atmosphere right down to its toenails. And it basically it pushed all my buttons. I can't tell you much beyond that. With Penny Dreadful, the TV, well, it's a TV show, but it still did it almost as well. I found it more enjoyable.
Yes.
Now, if you ask me to define that, we're in real trouble.
Well, there's one there's a couple I do want to throw out here, and I don't know. Has anybody seen The Lighthouse Golem?
I have not.
No.
If you've not, and it's I don't know about 10 years old, I want to say that one is wrapped in a lot of the aesthetics. And it's a murder mystery. There's a notion of there's a lot of class structure to it, but it comes in and wraps that aesthetic very well, and the story to me was well done as well. So if you like the murder mysteries that have that feel, that very occult feel, don't necessarily go for the happy ending, but we're back to Victorian Gothic. That to me was a lot of fun. Now, in terms of ones that were a little more snarky about the period, Burke and Hare, about the resurrection.
Simon and Andrew Serkis.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that movie. I actually own it. I love that movie so much.
The stories of the resurrectionists, not only Burke and Hare, but some of the others that would speed people along to the graveyard so that they could be sold for medical research. But the way they did that story was a lot of fun for me as well. And because again, I will grant they did not necessarily take that one on with the same sense of sincerity, but to be mildly understated. So, kind of looking at other things, I want to talk a little bit about the sense of technology and the occult and the balance and kind of the conflict we saw there so much from the period in story. And I want to kind of shift a little bit back more towards stories written in the period or not long afterwards, right? You know, we see a lot of things that I would still consider very much Victorian stories up until probably World War One, and even somewhat afterwards. You can kind of play with that notion, but the things that really hold that, because stories that were written slightly nostalgically to me about that period, but they were written, 10s, 20s, even some stuff into the early 30s. There's a lot of stories that were written that have that feel. So, Doc, I'm gonna throw this back at in your direction. When we look at some of the other stories that came out of that period, what are some other favorites, characters, stories that you might have found out of that influenced by that period of time that would be, again, back to the influences we've got now?
Hmm. Um,
Play Stump the Panelists.
Well,
well, it's kind of like,
or I mean, would that, because that's right. He sort of wrote in a Victorian style, kind of, right?
well, what comes to my mind right now is Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Hmm.
Okay.
And
Better choice.
famous for Tarzan, but also famous for a Princess of Mars and the other Barzoom stories, which were you were talking specifically about bringing the occult and technology together. And those are like, okay, technology, throw it out the window. We're going straight up magic. But still very good, very engaging stories, very much in the style, um, in a lot of different things. That's kind of what's in my head right now. But then again, I'm an adventure junkie, so what do you expect from me?
What about something like What We Do in the Shadows?
I haven't seen that, so I can't address that.
Ken, how about for you?
Jules Verne, I go with that.
Ah,
Between 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and the 80 Days Around the World, and he did a really good job. And he not as great as involving a lot of magic, but a lot more tech than you would normally see in those books at that time. Um, you know, so I would go with Verne on this one, and for the marriage of tech into his writing, and which was very controversial, I think, at the time. So as heavily leaned on it as he did, you know. So that's probably my thoughts. Is that, and even the journey to the center of the earth and things of that nature. So yeah, that's who I would go with for most influential, and we still use all those ideas today. I mean, look at Iron Sky, for God's sake. That was a movie. But yeah, so that's just me.
Lee, what about for you?
I can tell you the name of it. I am absolutely blanking on the author. King Solomon's Mines.
Oh,
Howard.
that's Quartermain. But the original King Solomon's Mines was, oh yeah,
85.
Yeah, I'm with you on Alan Quartermain Adventures. I love those too.
Oh, yeah. You got
Haggard,
some of the occult. Say again?
Haggard.
Hazard.
Haggard.
yeah.
Haggard. I was having a senior moment. I'm a senior. It's okay.
We all are.
Me more than most. I've got you've got some of the occult. You've got the technology. You've got the daring do with a plan until it falls apart. But that to me is what you're talking about in that respect. Is the Quartermain books.
Right.
Yep. Hansi, how about for you?
So I'm trying to understand sort of what you're trying to get at. So like books from the period that are more
Sure.
tech-oriented than
Whatever, something else from that period that's speaking to you. But I mean, because a lot of them, I mean, a lot of the Penny Dreadfuls, leaned heavily one way or the other. But I mean, when we look at the stories, a lot of the time it was hard to tell what's technology and what's magic because I think in a lot of ways that was a question of the day. We saw a lot of stories of alchemy reemerge during that period of time. So I mean, just another kind of story from the period that might speak to you, but kind of has that aesthetic to it.
I don't know if these are from the period, but The Devil Rides Out. That writer wrote 2 novels, and they actually made Hammer films out of them. So they're they got that Victorian thing going. This, but yeah, I'm sorry. The reading stuff hasn't been so good the last couple of years.
Well, and we've got to work in, because I mean, to me, the first thing that comes to mind for me is H.G. Wells, right? Time Machine.
Oh, of course.
Sure. And a lot of those stories, because I mean, that's one of those things that I grew up on was a lot of reading all of H.G. Wells and those stories that kind of echoed back.
That definitely has the technology, less with the occult.
Depends on how you read it. It's written very much for the technology, but so much of it is IFM technology.
Yeah.
So, and that's again, that was that balance that I always thought was fun to look at and see and go through. So, what about other stories? The other thing I think that we can't not talk about a little bit with the period of time was the notion of what else was going on in the world at the same period of time. Doc, you kind of talked about and hinted about this a little bit. The Victorian era, but we also had the Ottoman Empire. We had cowboys. We had so many other influences that, in ways, are still intrinsically linked with what we consider that period of the Penny Dreadfuls.
We had samurai.
We still had samurai. We had
right. Would that be considered Victorian? I mean, or just Western?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question because so much Western stuff featured. Oh, well, here was the Brit that's over here, or
Yep.
he's So, Ken, what about for you? What's some of the other stuff of that period? Some of the other stories that would speak to you.
Oh well, you already brought up H.G. Wells. Oh man, really bad TV show called Briscoe Kid.
Briscoe County.
Briscoe County Jr.
Briscoe County Jr. That sadly ended way too soon. But like you said, there was cowboys, samurai, a mariachi band. You could put them all together in one story and have it. So as far as, like I said, it was anything was possible then. It's kind of like what happened in the 80s with music, but back then with stories. Anything was possible because of all the new technology. And same thing happened in music back then. It's like all of a sudden you had all this new tech and anything's possible. So yeah, a lot of the old Western stories, the way they rebranded Billy the Kid, for instance, from a dirtbag con artist thief to a folk hero, that took a lot of doing, but they managed it. They made a lot of money off doing it, and it all started a few years after his death. They started making it where he was giving money to the poor. He did no such thing. He was doing this to be this guy. No, he wasn't. He was a scumbag thief who liked to shoot people in the back. He was a dirtbag, but they started rebranding him. And I think
photography, right? So they could take pictures of the dead outlaws and sell them. And so again, profit and technology.
Capitalism.
Exactly. But I think that's the first time as a young person I ever saw how rebranding worked. You know, the Billy the Kid, because they did a wonderful job. Even in the history books now, they've rebranded him. So it's really interesting to see it as we go forward and further out from the instance. So I know that is not a specific story, but it kind of is. I mean, it's one of the most famous Western stories we have. So it's not specific to one; it's to all of them, because it was one thing in the beginning about how horrible he was, and then when they figured out they could make money off of it. And that started, like you said, with the pictures. And then they started with the little magazine bits.
Fanzines.
And fanzines, that's it. And then they started with the novels, and then movies came. And by the time
it was really before that is when he was out there doing crimes, the tales of his exploits were newspaper fodder. People were eating that stuff up.
Yeah, but they still paint him. They didn't paint him as a folk hero.
No, they didn't. But
it's a good thing we don't have that today. I mean, you know.
Oh no. But that's the first time as a young person I saw that rebranding, and I was like, "Wow, you went from these articles to this," and that was the first time I'd ever seen it. And I was probably 6 or 7, well, not 6 or 7, 8 or 9 by the time I started seeing that, because I was hearing my family talk about it, and I had some elderly people who were alive in the 1800s, and and they were mad at the TV because Billy the Kid was a hero. So, but they were also mad for other reasons. But we won't get into all that. But yeah, right. So that's it.
So Lee, how about for you?
I am coming up more or less blank. The only thing I can think of is what they did with some of it was Michener and it was Japan. And Japan about that era to begin with.
For his books.
Yeah, well, I was weird. I like big books, and I didn't lie. That I haven't branched out much on that score because England was enough.
Mm-hmm.
Hansi, how about for you?
I'm sorry, where are we going with this again?
Is there anything else from that Victorian period, but that also it's from the period, and we can see the influence of the Victorian era on stories from outside.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, any of Kaurismäki, Seven Samurai and all those, right? Those wouldn't Rashomon and Seven Samurai be? I mean, I don't know what time period that is in Japan. I'm assuming it's around the same time. I don't know.
All right, Doc. What? Oh, you got something, Lee?
No, I was just
okay.
All right, Doc. How about for you?
Well, Ken's got me thinking about westerns, and I mean, I'm not sure when this stuff actually came about, but he's got me thinking about stuff like the Lone Ranger and the Adventures of Zorro. In some ways, the Adventures of Zorro is kind of more Victorian because you instead of the English aristocracy, you had the Spanish aristocracy. But it was still that same kind of class structure there. And I guess kind of a more modern reflection, I would also would look at like the Mummy movies, because those were definitely set in the time. but and I guess a little bit later than Victorian, but it definitely reflected that kind of fascination with the Orient and with unearthing ancient secrets,
Well,
and the mistakes in doing so.
20s, 30s,
Yeah.
around in there.
well, and yeah, also one of the things for me is Napoleon, right? This is the period of time when Napoleon's going to Egypt and finding the Rosetta Stone, and we can never separate England and France, as much as we may try.
Tell them that.
That's what the channel's for.
Well, we keep trying. There is a particular story that I do want to throw out to everybody because it's been interpreted a lot, but I would often say it's also very understated, but is very representative of the period. And that's because it involves kind of many of the occult flavors. It involves some of the technology, but it also involves a lot of the question of the mores of the period. And when I was in the UK a couple of years ago, I've got a picture of me sitting on a bench next to a statue of Oscar Wilde.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
And I don't think we can get away without talking about the picture of Dorian Gray.
Good.
So, Lee, because that to me is also kind of one of those quintessential stories we come back to because we can often reflect our time and how we reinterpret that story. So I'm going to throw just kind of a general idea around what are your thoughts on that story and both the time and how we see it now?
I can never separate the picture of Dorian Gray with Oscar Wilde's living situation,
Mm-hmm.
what he was involved, the government's intrusion into his life. But from the standpoint of Dorian Gray, I mean, who doesn't want to stay young and beautiful forever? Unless you're me. The motivation of the character was spot on. The vehicle for it was they went diving into Celtic legend for that one, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There's something very similar to it in Celtic legend. And the path that Dorian took toward his own demise. There's a lovely take on that in modern time called Phantom of the Paradise.
Yeah.
And they leaned heavily into that path. But the whole, I think it nicely combined the occult and what was being termed modern life during that period. And I think Oscar Wilde was brilliant for being able to see all of that. But I think in a sense he was living it. Not the live forever, stay beautiful, but the whole there's a price to pay for being yourself.
Well, that's part of the reason I wanted to bring that up because I think in so many ways he represents that period and the trials and the tribulations in so many ways.
Yeah. Had he been a woman, we would never have. I don't think we would have had Dorian Gray because a woman who was not properly subservient to her husband, it never saw the light of day. No one knew. He, on the other hand, wasn't about to be shoved in a corner. I have great admiration for Oscar Wilde. But yes, it does seriously reflect the stratification and what is expected of your class. There were I would have opted for a lower class. Thank you.
It's kind of interesting. It's almost like that story is almost about like an influencer today, like where
Yes,
right,
exactly.
you know, and even the rebranding too, brings up the influencer kind of thing, where you're only presenting this certain aspect of your personality and hiding, the authentic personality.
Well, I'd look at the portrait of Dorian Gray as a social commentary. That this was his look at the aristocracy, that they were all vain and concerned with being perfect, but they were like corrupt and venal to the core inside. And they just kept it hidden, and this was the portrait was his way of putting a mirror up to it so that all the working class people who were being abused by these folks would say, "Yep, that's them." No.
I don't have a whole lot to add to any of that. I think everybody hit everything mostly. I mean, it was a very entertaining story, and it was very reflective. And the more you think on it, the more you can find in it. And he may be one of the few people who actually intended you to think on it, unlike what people assign to other stories. Because people tend to assign things that the author didn't mean. But this is one of the few stories that he did mean to do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and the couple of reasons I wanted to come in on the picture of Dorian Gray, because I think it's also very much about the balance between the creatives and the creative life from quote unquote high society and proper society, and the conflict, and what's timeless beauty comes from the art, and versus what does it necessarily sometimes take to create that art. And that to me is one of the things that I have always taken away from that story as well, is what you may see is, like you were saying with the influencer on the front end, you see the influencer, but you don't necessarily see the scars and the work and everything that goes on beneath that. And so that's part of the reason I wanted to throw that out there and come in on this, is because I think it's important. It's an influence, whether we know it or not, for everybody in a creative community. So I'm going to throw one last question out there, because, I mean, there's a ton of stuff. We have barely scratched the surface, as always, on the period. There's a ton of, there's always the fun, creepy facts of the period, like Mary Shelley continuing to hold Percy's heart, the little lump of coal that it was. In her death till the day she died. But Hansi, I'm going to start with you on this one. What haven't we talked about the period of the Penny Dreadfuls and drama that you think we need to touch on?
Well, I am currently watching Chapelwaite. Has anybody else watched it? It's based on a short Stephen King story with Adrian Brody. And he's a ship captain, comes back to, of course, his cursed home that he's inherited, and brings back his multiracial children, and they're just treated miserably by the whole town, and it's also like he's sort of like, again, like he's trying to figure out if he's crazy or not, because he's seeing things and stuff, and everyone in the town is like, you bring the plague, you're bringing, and they don't have a word for the disease, they don't even know, it's just penicillin, right? I'm sorry. I'm sort of lost in this. I was watching it all day, and I'm just like, he was just digging up his cousin's grave to see if he was actually in there. But I think it's the goth and the darkness that I like. I just find it attractive and pretty and alluring. And, as long as I didn't have to actually live during that period, I'm cool with it.
Yeah.
All right, Doc, what haven't we touched on that you want to touch on?
So, Hansi talking about having a love for the goth and the darkness. I guess for me, it's always the darkness always needs to be set off by light. So I'm going to offer up a show from Canadian broadcasting, which is Murdoch's Mysteries.
Mm.
Because while they're often murder mysteries, they're much more lighthearted. There's some comedy into it, and as you can tell, I'm into sort of the science and the investigation of stuff. But part of it is sort of the whole idea of bringing civilization to the frontier, which was very much a staple of the period.
It goes right up to Star Trek.
Yeah. Well, because a lot of it was, during the Victorian era, people moved out a lot because the cities were overcrowded, everything was expensive. If you were willing to do the work, you could go out and you could carve a place out of the wilderness, and build new cities, which will get overcrowded and force more people. But it was, a certain sense of
Adventure.
Both adventure, but sort of making your own future. That was part of that time. That's what I want to throw out.
Ken, what about for you?
I'm not going to go for a specific book, but influences. At the time, it was a time of fascination. You're talking about your first photographs, your first moving films. You're talking about the very intricate music boxes and the little animatrons that they did. And like you said, it's bringing the culture and things to the frontier, but it's about, like I keep saying, anything was possible at that point. You had the Eiffel Tower going up. You had people jumping off the Eiffel Tower with a parachute that didn't work.
They hated that thing was built. I was just reading something about that. They hated. People were really upset about it. They thought it was awful.
Yeah, it was the worst thing ever, and it went up in 2 years. And just that
On a bet.
On a bet.
On a bet, yes.
Yeah.
And it was all these things anything was possible. So for me, it was the fascination and the technology that really influenced and changed fiction and changed how even mass-produced books and magazines, the literal Penny Dreadfuls changed the amount of people who could read.
Yep.
I mean, these things were reserved for the aristocrats until then. We encroached upon their sanctity, their inner sanctums. It was
in pulps, even right, and pulps on the forefront.
And it's one of the reasons why when you go to a literature class, you still have professors, or at least I did, and I know it's been a minute, that hated science fiction because it wasn't,
They hate all genre fiction.
So that's what I have. It's the fascination and the tech and the adventure and everything like that just made everything better.
All right, Lee, you get the last word.
The rise of spirituality in the Victorian era, and the interesting stories that came out of that. Interesting people as well. Well, that Madame Blavatsky. It's been too long since lunch.
You got it.
The whole investigating, trying to debunk, that had its own well-known people. But spirituality, the whole table tipping, seances, the whole 9 yards, gained a great deal during the Victorian era. It was something that people got into, like we get into baseball. And it made for some really interesting stories. I think we might want to touch on that at some point.
Yeah, I'd like to do it. We've talked about it a couple of times about doing a whole show just about the spiritualist movement of the period. Mm-hmm. So I have to get that back on the list.
But you also reminded me that was also the time of Harry Houdini
and Cook Oil, right? So when you have Whimsy on one side, and then the guy who does it, it was so weird because they're both representing what, not what, right? It was like, it's so cool.
The creator of Sherlock Holmes is heavy into the spiritualist movement.
And we completely forgot about the Prestige.
Oh yeah.
Until I brought up Magicians.
Seen that one yet?
Well, if you haven't seen that one,
it's an excellent movie, but it's very much set in Victorian magic culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're gonna have to do one on that. We'll get around to that, but. We've got a little long on this one, but before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys. And, of course, your Tales of Magic, Woe, and, well, in your case, how do we comedically kill everybody off? So, Doc, you're up first.
All right. My name is Doc Coleman. I write steampunk comedy adventure. If you're interested in finding out more about me or my books, just go to your favorite search engine and search for Doc Coleman Steampunk, and that will help you find my website at doccoleman.com. It will also help you find my Amazon author page, where you can see all of the stuff that I've got in print, and by the time this is out, that will include my new novel, The Kindred of Kali, which releases in ebook on August 1st and in paperback on August 2nd. So look for that.
Excellent. Ken
Lange. You can find me on kenlangeauthor.com. You can find me on Amazon and most other book places. And just don't forget the E when you type it in there, because you will get somebody very different. So, not that they're bad, but
just different.
Just not my thing. And so. But yeah, you can find me there.
Lee?
I'm Lee Martindale. You can find me at www.harphaven.net, which has links to my e-store, my bibliography, my blog when I get back to it, and just pretty much this is how you get introduced.
Hansi?
I am working on a whole bunch of horror films. I'm in a film called Grind that is having its premiere in August in Pittsburgh, with Lange and Felissa Rose and a whole bunch of great horror people. And you can find me on IMDb. I have about 30 credits now for horror films. And also I'm on TikTok as Squee Queen.
And you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, creatingpros.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we will see you again soon. Thanks for joining us.